Hello, everyone. I'm Amy Woods, Executive Director of Alumni Relations at Marist and a graduate from the class of 1997. I'm joined today by my colleague from Alumni Relations, Donna Feldman, and we're very excited to present this webinar to you today featuring the Marist Poll with Dr. Lee Miringoff, Dr. Barbara Carvalho, and Jay DeDapper, entitled Polling in the Age of Crises. If you encounter any audio issues, you do have the option to dial in by telephone. We will provide that number and code in the chat box. Donna, do you have that? And all participants' microphones are muted and all videos are off except for the presenters. We're going to reserve the chat option for any technical questions you have or general questions for the Marist staff listening in. Please use the Q&A feature for questions that you have for the Marist Poll team, and be sure to direct your questions to me or Donna, as the Marist Poll team may not see them while they are speaking. And now for our presenters. Lee Miringoff directs the Marist College Institute for Public Opinion and appears regularly in multimedia outlets across the globe, serving as an analyst on polls and politics. Lee is on the faculty of the Political Science Department and enlightens Marist students in concentrations including public opinion and politics, survey research, political communication, and pertinent topics as they arise in today's politics. Barbara Carvalho directs the Marist College Poll. Her expertise is in elections, politics, and public policy, and they're included in multiple publications that she has authored. Barbara's analysis is frequently included in print and electronic media. Together, Lee and Barbara direct the NBC News/Marist poll of key electoral battleground states and the national NPR PBS NewsHour Marist poll. Jay DeDapper directs the Marist poll's Strategy and Innovation Initiative. He came to the Marist poll after a more than 2-decade-long career in broadcast journalism. Jay's instincts and political insights garnered acclaim from his peers during his tenure at WABC and WNBC in New York. His storytelling skills and innovative production led to dozens of awards, including the National Cronkite Award, a dozen Emmys, and scores of local citations. Lee, Barbara, and Jay co-host the Marist Poll's weekly podcast, Poll Hub, where they draw back the curtain on survey research and provide insight into the meaning of polls in everyday life. Lee, Barbara, and Jay, thank you in advance for joining us tonight, and welcome.
Thank you, Amy, and hi, everybody. Thanks to Donna as well and the advancement team for putting the event together tonight. I'm not sure if this is our third or fourth, but we enjoyed doing it. As Amy just mentioned, that we've been doing close to 250 episodes of the podcast, which we do weekly, and Barbara, Jay, and myself, under the direction of Mary Griffith and some very, very talented students, present the podcast called Poll Hub. Tonight gives us a much better chance to interact with you guys, the wider Marist audience, alumni, friends, and some journalists who are tuning in as well. To begin, just since our last webinar in June, a great deal has changed in the United States and the world. COVID is finally more under control after nearly 1 million people in America have died. Inflation has taken a hold on the cost of living. War is raging, of course, in the Ukraine, with great loss of life and devastation of the region. President Biden has seen his initial decent popularity numbers dissipate with his inability to pass key parts of his legislative program, the Build Back Better, for example, although he has gotten the infrastructure bill and the American Rescue Act through Congress. Following his State of the Union message, a revitalized NATO abroad, some unity here at home, many Democrats have reassessed their view of President Biden's performance and are again counted among his supporters. Not so for Republicans and many independents who still question his leadership. The nation clearly remains, as we sit tonight, divided along party lines. A strong cultural disconnect continues to undercut many elements that bind our society together. And the democracy itself still faces a series of unprecedented challenges. With so many crises to deal with, the voice of the public, as measured in public opinion polls, like what we do, need to be center stage as we try as a nation to kind of reclaim our footing and move forward. Tonight, as Donna mentioned, we welcome your questions during the program. That's sort of the fun part for us. But to get things going, Barbara Carvalho will talk about where the public stands on the critical issues today, what the polls are showing, as we go about the business of measuring public opinion. And then Jay is going to provide his take on the crises facing the nation. And then I get to sort of wrap up the formal part with tossing my 2 cents in by looking at the road, looking at the road to the 2022 midterm elections.
You're
Well,
always thinking baseball.
They are mid-season of a sort. But anyway, without baseball, you're up, Barb, in the batter's box. Your turn.
Thank you very much, Lee. And can Jay, I can see you. So can you hear us okay?
Yes. Yeah, you guys sound great.
Excellent.
And,
Excellent.
very good.
Yeah, I had a few technical problems, so I kind of pushed Lee over here. But thanks everyone for joining this evening. And it was great to see so many of you back for another round of MIPO chat. As Lee said, you know we love questions. So we're looking forward to hearing what's on your mind too. So how is polling different in times of crisis? I'd probably argue that for public pollsters bent on knowing what the public really thinks about the important issues of the day, that it really isn't much different. What's always top of mind in scientifically measuring public opinion is first question wording, the timing of the polls in relation to the specific events that we're trying to capture opinion about, and also making every effort to make sure the results accurately reflect the people that we say it does. So that's no small task with the changes in technology that we've had, and we've all heard about, you know, people not responding to polls. That can be a tall order. So we can talk more about that when we, when we open it up to some questions, and we can tell you a little bit about some of the decisions that we make to help do that. But I'd like to start by putting some numbers around the issues that Lee discussed. Let's start with the president. Biden is off to Brussels for the special NATO summit today. The recent Gallup World Poll shows that the U.S. is seen as much stronger light by citizens around the world than it has been in actually nearly a decade. So that doesn't count just the Trump administration, but the latter part of the Obama administration too. At home, after a post-State of the Union bounce, Biden seems to have settled back down into the low 40s for an approval rating. And though he's starting to slump again, it's better than the mid to high 30s that he was lingering at just before the war in Ukraine. What should probably be more of a concern for Biden is that only 18% of Americans strongly approve of the job that he's doing, while 38% strongly disapprove. And so that intensity can be a key factor, especially as we have the midterm elections coming up, which Lee will chat a little bit about later. So certainly top of mind for Americans is Ukraine. And Americans often want presidents who can show both power and diplomacy in foreign policy. But they judge presidents as either too cautious or too aggressive. So sometimes there's really, there's no winning situation. Biden, for the most part, has found that balance right now. Mostly due to Democrats and independents in the country, Republicans generally see him as far too cautious. But question wording matters here. On Biden's handling of Ukraine, more Americans approve than disapprove. But as on his handling of Russia, more Americans disapprove than approve. But Ukraine has changed, at least, for the moment. It's put a pause on some of the significant issues and domestic concerns for Biden. And Putin has provided him with a foreign adversary that has even united Democrats with many Republicans. The big one is the economy. Pre-Ukraine, the most important issue facing the country, according to the plurality of Americans, was inflation. And it's still an important concern, but it has a new bad guy in Putin. Most Americans, including a majority of Republicans, are willing to sacrifice and endure higher energy prices, at least in the short term, in order to thwart Russia's aggression. So it's not an answer, but it certainly is an opportunity for Biden to get hold of the economic woes that are really concerning many Americans and are likely to be front and center as we get closer to the election in November. Lee mentioned COVID. 2 years of COVID. And that's really, COVID was the issue that provided Biden his key to the White House. Right now, he's back in positive numbers on COVID. A majority of Americans approve of the administration's response. Most polls show the approval somewhere in the low to mid 50s, certainly nowhere near the 2/3, mid 60s that he saw when he was elected. And about 8 in 10 Americans are also cautiously optimistic about the fact that the country may finally be emerging from the pandemic. On the negative side, preparing for future variants or other pandemics certainly look to be difficult. Tolerance for mask mandates, business closings, Zoom classrooms, all very, very low. And finally, I just want to also address what we kind of draw a circle around, and that is the culture clash. It's nothing new to policy or politics, but there is a new resurgence and intensity in 2022 over issues like abortion, gay rights, racial justice, democracy, and what teachers teach. What's, I think, really unusual about the rise of such polarizing debates on these particular topics is that they are all issues on which Americans have already formed a very strong consensus. But they emerge now with extreme rhetoric and in many cases proposed state legislation and judicial appeals. So let me start first with abortion. An overwhelming proportion of Americans believe abortion should remain legal, especially for exceptions such as rape, incest, and the life of the mother. And when I say overwhelming proportion, it's nearing 9 in 10 Americans. However, 3/4 of Americans also believe there should be significant restrictions and limitations, especially after the first trimester. When we look at an issue like gay rights, 8 in 10 Americans believe gay or lesbian relations between consenting adults should be legal, and 70% believe same-sex marriages should be legally recognized. But issues of when and how to teach about sexual orientation and gender identity, or the less understood reality of trans children, is reigniting intense debates. And then racial justice. We've seen so many marches, protests, but according to an AP NORC poll, few Americans think there's been significant progress over the past 50 years. In other words, most Americans do not think that there has been enough progress to achieve equal treatment of Black Americans by the criminal justice system. And most Americans say a lot more progress is necessary. But what that means in terms of resources then and solutions has again shifted the debate to state and local levels. Democracy, Lee mentioned democracy. We also have a consensus about the fact that Americans believe our democracy is under siege, a very strong consensus in the mid-80s. But there are also very different views on how to save that democracy. On one side, we see an interest in tightening laws, particularly for election counts and making sure that elections are accurate and fair. And then on another side, we see concerns about voter suppression and making sure that all voters have access. So there's a lot to talk about. There's a lot of issues that are not just the ones we've mentioned, but a lot of things right on the front burner. So with that, I'd like to pass the baton to Jay DeDapper to add his insights into what this means for the road ahead. Jay?
Yeah, thanks, Barb, and thanks to everybody who's joining us tonight. One of the things that I was often asked as a political reporter, and we're asked as pollsters all the time, is not so much about what we found or the past or even last week. It's like, what does this mean? What's going to happen? And we don't predict the future. We don't have a crystal ball. We do have a crystal ball, but we keep it under lock and key because we don't really want to give away all the secrets. One of the stories that we have talked about, it's not a story, one of the things I think we've talked about, not just on our podcast, not just internally, I think every pollster has talked about it almost ad nauseum, is the partisan divide. We are a deeply divided nation. It's not news to anybody. It didn't start in 2020, didn't start in 2016. It has been growing, the divide, over most of this century, which didn't used to mean much, but now 22 years into this century, it actually starts to sound like something. There are, strangely, in this moment, some signs of change. Maybe they are cracks. Maybe we revert to the mean, and I mean that in every way that you can take mean. But there are a couple of signs of change that perhaps the partisan divide, as entrenched as it is, there are still places where we find agreement. And the war in Ukraine, the invasion of Ukraine by Vladimir Putin and Russia, is an example, I think, of rallying around the flag that we haven't seen since the 9/11 attacks. Now, that was a much stronger reaction at that time. George Bush, in a poll, I believe it was a Gallup poll, 2 weeks after 9/11, had the highest approval rating of any president ever measured. It was 90%. We may see that again. Maybe if the Martians invade, will aliens land? Maybe, but 90% is kind of unheard of. It was an incredible rally around the flag moment. Now that is very different. We were attacked. We were attacked in Washington, D.C. and in New York. It was an attack directly on the nation, much like Pearl Harbor. This is nothing like that. At the same time, we are seeing a bit of this rallying around the flag. Barb talked about the support for sanctions when we asked that question. 88% of Democrats, 79% of Republicans, 84% of independents agreed that we should be sanctioning Russia. That's pretty much uniform. We don't get any more uniform in these days than support for that. When we then asked, well, what about if gas prices are higher? What about the higher energy prices? You still on board for sanctions? 80% of Democrats were, 74% of independents, 58% of Republicans. There's a dip, but it's still a majority that support that. So I do think that we see in the situation in a foreign land, overseas, that does not directly involve the US, but is very important to a lot of Americans. I do think it begins to show that when we get out of our tiny little fights about all these little things and the Twitter wars and the flames and all that stuff, that perhaps there is a place where we again can come back to a shared sense of reality and maybe a shared sense of purpose. We have asked questions about what people think the government should do or public officials should do. Should they be compromising to find solutions, or should they be standing by principle even if it's gridlock? We've asked that question for about a decade. And while it has been declining, the number of people who want to see the public officials working together to accomplish something, even now, 64% of Americans support that idea that politicians shouldn't just be standing on principle and blowing everything up. And that includes a majority of Democrats, 75%, a majority of Republicans, 52%, and a majority of independents, 67%. So again, here, the numbers, there is a partisan gap, but there's not this partisan divide. There are a majority of people in every party that support this idea. So while it's been declining, that's another sign. Finally, the thing that we are looking at, I think the thing that when we talk about the future, trying to predict the future, we are moving out one of the three big crises that we faced. We've talked about COVID, and there's a general agreement in our last poll. I think it's 75, 75, 75. We're pretty close to that the pandemic is behind us. So Americans believe the pandemic's behind us. Whether they're right or not, they believe it. And I think that leaves two crises that are still front and center. And that is obviously what's happening in Europe, but also the economy. And one of the things that's been so interesting to us, and we've talked about this on the podcast, and it's a little hard to wrap your head around why this is happening. There's a lot of different people positing, rationale for why this is happening. We haven't found in our polling an answer for this yet. But the economy, by all the statistics that you would look at, the Bureau of Labor Statistics or the Census Bureau, or whoever puts out, is really doing very well. The largest number of jobs, the highest job growth, the fastest rate of job growth in 50 years has happened over the last 18 months. The unemployment rate is extremely low. The stock market, despite today, is very high, blah, 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 blah. All that's great. Inflation. And inflation seems to be the thing that we forgot about, changes everybody's perspective on the economy. So the numbers are all good, except for inflation. And yet the polling is terrible on the economy. When we asked people if people in your community are economically better off now than they were a year ago, 51% of adults said worse. Empirically, that's not possible. They are not worse off. There is nothing in the economic data that indicates that half of the country is worse off. It's the opposite. But people, what they feel, what they see versus what the numbers say, the hard data, is a very different thing. Gallup asked a different question. They asked, is the economy overall getting better or getting worse? And last month, 70% of Americans said the economy is getting worse. So that comes back again to I think the inflation thing, and that is what people feel. So you can throw all the numbers you want at people. Joe Biden can stand up and say the economy's doing great. Look at all these new jobs. Look at the unemployment rate. Really, we're just doing great. You just got to believe me, or you just got to look at the numbers. And then people go and they pay $4.50 for a gallon of gas, and that's all out the window. That's the thing that I think is most interesting to watch, is economic thing. We do not know what's going to happen in Europe. We do not know where that's going to go. The economy is a very different animal, though, because there are lots of different factors at work, and there's a lot more of that is in our control. And so I'm really interested to see, as we go forward polling month after month, whether people's perception of the economy begins to align more with the numbers, or if that one number, inflation, is the thing that continues to drive a really negative perception of what is otherwise a very strong economy. And to be fair, the wage growth, the real wage growth or income growth, household income growth over the last 18 months has been historic. And it is back to where it was, or very close to where it was right before the pandemic crashed everything. But real growth, when you account for inflation, we've actually lost ground. And that's where the numbers, it depends on how you look at the numbers, which kind of is how do you ask questions in poll. It kind of comes back to that. You can play around with data, you can look at data in different ways to make different arguments, and objectively the economy is in great shape. But when you ask the question about, do you feel the pain at the pump? Do you feel like you're making ground up? Do you feel like the economy is working for you? And people say no, there's probably a very good reason for that. It's not just that they're bummed out. It's that inflation is eating up all of the gains that they are seeing. So before we jump ahead and talk about 2022 and some of the impacts that this may have on the midterms, why don't we take some questions first from you guys? Because I know a lot of people have been submitting questions, and I'm sure you have a few. Let's talk about this stuff that we just talked about, and then we can peer ahead into our crystal ball that we keep under lock and key for 2022.
Jay, we actually have one that relates to what you were just speaking about. How much of a factor is the people's perception of the economy for the midterm elections?
Well, Lee, that jumps ahead to 2022. Why don't you take that one now?
Perception is a whole big deal in politics. And one of the reasons that Jay's talking about, let's try to get a handle on the reality empirically and the public perception, which is a very different animal. Perception's an awful lot to do with politics generally. And if you're going to talk about the 2022 elections, which I will momentarily, the public perceptions are kind of really critical moving forward. Is Joe Biden up to the task of leading the nation with a Democratic Congress and Senate, or is it time yet again to change the course of our balance in government. As I'll talk about in a couple minutes, with the exception of the 2004 election, in this century, there's been a change election every 2 years, which means either the occupant of the White House becomes a Democrat or Republican, depending on whichever party's in power at that time, or the Congress shifts, the House or the Senate flips. Every single time we've had that, with the exception of 2004. And so voters could again be in a restless mood, and that would work against the Democrats, clearly, who have the narrowest of margins right now, the thinnest of margins, both in the Senate and in the House of Representatives. Thank you for that question.
What else do we have?
Okay. We have another one. Earlier you mentioned the Gallup World Poll. From a technical and methodological perspective, what's your opinion of the World Poll? Should we believe it as valid global metric?
Well, certainly it is difficult polling people in different countries, and Gallup has been doing this for decades, and they have actually built a pretty rigorous design. Most of the countries that they do poll in, and the specific ones that I was referring to, which are part of the EU or part of NATO, they have had polling projects, and they have been doing polling in those countries for many years, many decades. So it is a rigorous poll. It is something that you can actually follow over time, decades over time, and see what the differences are. But Gallup also just, I believe, recently did a poll this month as well about what Americans think other countries think of us at this point. And what's interesting is it does really align with what people think of us as well. We've seen a more positive growth in Americans' perceptions of how the rest of the world sees us. I don't think people realize that this is something that has been a change not just through the Trump administration. I think there's a lot of assumptions that somehow that because of how contentious Trump was with many of our allies, that perceptions of us around the world was just a Trump problem. It had started prior to that. And so what Gallup is seeing right now is a lot of gains. Now, granted, these are not huge numbers. When you look back to President George W. Bush, when you look back to Clinton, and the first George Bush, and even Reagan, I mean, those numbers are starkly greater in people's perceptions of America's prestige, in the world. But I think that that's something that Biden is very intentionally trying to change as well.
We might see, Barb, you mentioned the Reagan, I'm thinking of the 1984 presidential election and how we've had the thawing of the Cold War, and yet then, where the wall hadn't come down yet and all that, we had these ads that the Reagan team took out. The greatest ad, probably one of the best I've ever seen, with a bear, and you don't know if this bear is going to be dangerous or not. That was obviously a metaphor for Russia, Soviet Union at the time. You don't know if that bear is going to be dangerous or not, but you can't take a chance if it is. The message, in essence.
But unfortunately,
I think we've come full circle.
Well, but,
on that.
But unfortunately, I think what we've seen, particularly over the last decade and a half, is well, first of all, Russia has opened up its markets to the U.S., and there was really a change in attitude. And you mentioned Reagan, but yeah, that was seen as very last century. And economically, the threat, I think, was seen for the U.S. Was China. China is the big enemy because China's a very significant economic enemy, and China, massages, its currency. China controls its imports and exports. So there's a lot out of our control with China, and certainly they have become a very formidable opponent in the economic sense. So the focus over the last decade and a half has really been this move from seeing Russia, yes, as a political enemy, but not an economic enemy. China was the real enemy for our economy and for what keeps us strong domestically and internationally. So I think what we're seeing is really the results of perhaps that casualness that we have had with relationships with Russia.
Yeah. Jay, when Barb said that the numbers, the point I was making about Reagan was so last century, I thought you were going to say something about last century and things I tend to point out. Nothing?
No. I'm good tonight. I'm gonna withhold that stuff there. Why don't we take a couple more before we go to 2022? Because I know there's a lot of questions and we don't want to skip by too many. We may not get to all of them, or we can stick around and try and get to all of them. But how about a couple more?
So there's two ways to go. We have several on the polling process, right? And questions about polling, but then there are several on specific topics. So I'm not sure which way you'd like to go right now, Jay.
What do you guys think? Why don't we do a polling process? Our poll hub, in case you haven't listened, and I recommend you do, because we're on it. It's short. It's 20, 25 minutes, pops into your podcasting app. Anyway, we geek out, which I know doesn't sound like a great reason to listen, but it's actually kind of fun. And one of the things that we do is we talk about all this polling stuff about how the sausage is made. And the audience seems to like it. I mean, so maybe you should try that. Anyway, let's do a sausage making one.
All right. So there's the general question on how the Marist poll collects its data. And then we've had a question submitted earlier on how do you ensure that the questions do not have bias when you are asking them?
We've made a science out of coin flipping.
Well, polling has gone through dramatic changes, as you don't need a bunch of pollsters to tell you that. But technologically, we can get opinions in so many different ways. Even though there are so many downsides to telephone polling, it still is the best and most scientific way of getting a representative sample and getting representative opinion of Americans. So why don't people do more of that? And it's not just because people don't answer or because we have this technology to block phone numbers. There's technology to block surveys, no matter how you're trying to collect the information. And also, people don't answer surveys if they don't answer surveys, whether you're texting them, inviting them to online, or, catching them on the street. So the issue really here is that with telephone polling, we know that everybody has some kind of a telephone. So we do have a way of reaching them, unlike other methods of measurement. The issue with telephone polling is it's incredibly expensive. Yeah, it's
modern,
very
modern.
expensive, partially because some of the regulations that were passed in the mid-teens in 2015, there were some significant regulations about how we had to dial the numbers. So it became incredibly expensive to do that. And then we have to dial a lot more numbers. And the reason for that is because there are a lot more numbers. We were just chatting in the office today, talking about the difference between landline numbers and cell phone numbers. I have 5 different cell phone numbers, not because I have 5 cell phones, but because I have an iPad and I have an iPhone and I have a security camera in my house. And so all these different devices require wireless connection, and very often if the wireless connection is not available, you end up with a cell phone number. So there are tons, if we're doing telephone interviewing, there are tons and tons of numbers. So when you see or hear that pollsters have a tough time getting people on the phone, it's not just because they're refusing us, it's because we're going through all of these numbers that actually aren't connected to a person that we can talk to. So that's a big deal. So we do telephone interviewing. We are constantly experimenting. Our students love to experiment. We love their ideas. We are experimenting with combinations of online polling, texting, text-to-web polling, social media polling. We know is not representative.
We're doing a test tonight, everyone.
Actually, we are. We are doing a test tonight, and maybe you're going to get a text from the Marist poll.
Play the lottery if you do.
Please answer. But we take, we really go to great strides to make this, to ensure that our samples are representative. And we can talk about geography at another point. Maybe when
and
we
the
talk
the
about
proof's in the pudding here. There often, when you poll, there's no way to know if you're right or wrong unless you're polling an election. Because if you're polling, how do people feel about the environment? There's no way to know if you're right or wrong because there's no definitive people say this. An election is definitive, well, it should be. You get the who won, who lost in the numbers, and you can compare it. COVID provided a really interesting case study. There were a lot of pollsters who did a lot of polls asking whether people were vaccinated or not. Well, guess what? There's data about how many people were vaccinated. And when that was looked at in a very thorough study, looking at 20 some odd polls, including ours, over a course of, I think, 9 months, I may not be getting the dates exactly right, the difference was so small that it was almost immeasurable between what the polls, the average of the polls found, were the number of people vaccinated and the actual number of people vaccinated as reported by the CDC. So there's a notion out there, I think, that polling is fraught with problems, and there are problems, but that doesn't mean the results are problematic. It's still very valid, and the scientific methods that we use to do it and that others use that were included in this study of COVID-19 demonstrated that it is still a great way and a very accurate way to gather public opinion.
Do you mind if I jump in, Amy, and just answer the quick couple of
I saw
follow-up
that. I saw
questions?
that. Yeah.
Yes, we our surveys are done in both English and Spanish, and when we are in states or communities where there are other large blocks of ethnic groups that speak a different language, and California immediately comes to mind. We add quite a number of languages as well in order to be able to have people participate. One of the great things about the text to web is that it doesn't matter which language you speak. You can choose whichever language you want. And we'll be able to then participate in the poll. So that was easy. So that makes things a lot easier. And then what was the second one that was the follow-up? Because I was just going to say yes to Spanish. I never just say yes. Lee and Jay know that. I filibuster.
There's one in chat. While you correctly identify perception as an opinion driver, how do you measure the disparity of concerns with American strategy dealing with Russia, Ukraine, China, Iran? Yeah. Doesn't all these extra cell lines increase potential error because as opposed to landline, there's not a unique number tied to one specific household location? Very true. And that's why it's so expensive.
Yes.
Because we can fix for that.
What's really cool about cell phones is pretty much everybody has one. So when we had landlines, some families had more than one landline. So we had to take into account the fact that we didn't want to give some families who had, 3 or 4 phones in their house, that extra chance of being selected. So we had methods to do that, as we do have methods with cell phones. But what's so cool about cell phones is the person who's usually holding it is the person who owns it and the person that we're going to speak
and
with.
Clearly with the landline, you have to be home or we're not going to get you. Okay, with cell phone, yeah, when we want your opinion, we'll ask for it, and
Yeah.
we going to where you are at where
Yeah.
you are. So that actually is an advantage.
And landlines, we had to select someone in the household because they were community phones
Yeah.
or family phones.
And we always get the question, well, how do you deal with the fact that, I have a cell phone with a area code from Salt Lake City and I live in Dallas or whatever. And you know that when you're on the phone, it's telling the carrier where you are, right? That's how we know. And that's how we're able to make sure that we're talking to people in the area we want to talk to, regardless of their area code on their
Just
cell phone.
don't
That's a good point.
just don't tell Putin that's how you do it.
Well, I mean, our the people who provide us the phone
Yeah, we're
number.
not doing it. Yeah, I didn't want to make it. Yeah, we're not actually spying on your phone.
Yeah,
Sorry, but yes, the
there's
providers,
a lot of
the carriers
information
do.
that they're connecting with your cell phone.
Yeah, there was
but you had the other question too, Jay. I don't want to leave that one.
Measuring
Yeah,
perception.
right. The other one is about. Sorry, and I missed the one that you want us, which is a good one. The person's basically saying, I venture to guess most Americans are not really aware of all the threats, and it gets to the bigger question of when you're asking questions about the opinion of people and they don't know very much about it, how valid are the answers we get? And we face that and we deal with that partly in the way we ask the questions and design the questions, right?
Well, but I think it's also important for us to know whether people do know. I mean, we don't want. I don't think when we're measuring a particular issue, everybody has an opinion. Everyone may not have all the facts, but actually in a democracy, that's okay. Everybody has the right to vote from their perspective and their perception. So that is kind of part of what the U.S. System is all about. And actually, when we are doing polls and creating questions, I think we're very cautious about providing too much information because we don't want to give people information that they don't have. We actually want to measure the opinion that they have about the issue. And, you have the opportunity in our polls to say something other than the choices we give you, and also to say that you're unsure.
And we often have follow-up questions. So like that, the case of the one that we've been talking about tonight, which is the case of, do you support sanctions? Well, do you support sanctions if energy prices go up? Well, that is an extra piece of information, but we don't ask that first. But that then gets to help understand, well, do people understand the implications of sanctions? So that's another way of getting more nuance without leading the witness, if you will, which is what we cannot and will not do.
Yeah.
And people will they will take action, or they will make certain choices based on the information that they have.
Yeah.
And so there's never really going to be a level playing field. So we're interested in people's
And
opinions.
that gets back to that initial question about perception and its importance. It doesn't have to be fact driven. It can be just perception driven.
And that's one last thing. One of the things that we teach in our academy, which is an online academy that we have that you can link to on our website, is that knowing a little bit about polling can go a long way as a polling consumer. If you see a very large unsure number, like 20, 30, 40% unsure, you might be able to read between the lines there that people don't really know enough about it to have an opinion. That's one flag for that, is a very high unsure.
Okay.
You want to do one more, or you want to go to 2020, Lee? I know
Well, maybe I should
2022.
maybe I'll do a quick walk through 2020.
Okay, 2022. Yeah,
Okay, you got me on
that was
that.
my fault.
That's okay. The last 2 years have been quite the blur.
And then we can get back to some more questions, because it really it's fun for us to hear what's on your mind. And yes, I'll take a quick question right now. We're in my office. Barb and I are in North Salem in Westchester County. Jay's in Columbia County right now. The advantages of being remote. We one of the things about COVID is, if you can find a good silver lining in this horrible thing, was that we've had to adjust as a workforce, and all you have as well. But also the way we did polling during COVID was we were all remote. And the advantage to that was we no longer had the physical limitations of the number of workstations in our phone center. We could double and triple the number of interviewers we had. And we did, and in fact, we did that because there were so many people at home not able to get out to their normal jobs, and students were very eager to join in our numbers. So, you know, there's not very,
Although now students have the choice.
yes, we do. We have both going.
We have both. We have both. There's lots of fun. There's lots of spinning of the prize wheel in the phone center, and there's lots of spinning of the virtual prize wheel.
And there are a lot of props at Lee's house, apparently.
Yes, and I just wanted, you know, you saw the
Lee
phone
always-
that
Lee
Dennis Murray.
always
This
has to
is
have
my office. Someone just said, "Do you remember the good old days in Adrian?" Yes, Adrian was the small shoebox that Greystone came in, and that was in the right outside Donnelly on the way to the campus.
It's a lawn now.
Yes, it's all lawn. It's the only building, for those of you who remember, where inside and outside were almost identical. If it was cold outside, it was cold inside. If it was hot outside, it was hot inside.
And so your props.
Yeah, well, someone did ask, yes, this is indeed a seltzer bottle, and it has my father's name on it, because when I was a kid growing up, he had a seltzer business in Poughkeepsie, and these are Czechoslovakian hand-blown glass, no seam in it, and I will guarantee you I'm the only pollster in America who knows how to take this apart and put it back together again. So that's if polling ever goes the way of
Well, it may
The dinosaurs.
You know, you may get your wish.
yeah, no, there's another opportunity for me somewhere in that. It will be fixing seltzer bottles. Anyway, let me take a quick stab at 2022, and then we'll come back to your questions. I did find very interesting in what Barb and Jay were talking about in the changes that Ukraine has brought to American public attitudes, and especially to Republicans. You know, during Donald Trump, the Republican Party went through a very, very isolationist outlook. And yet, the Republicans right now are the ones who find Joe Biden the most cautious in terms of his handling of Russia and Putin. So in a sense, the hawkishness of the Republican Party is back right now. And if you don't have to take my word for it, just, you know, the Republican senators who have supported aid to Ukraine and have attacked the Putin aggression, I've underscored that, and I think also that both of you guys talked about was the energy prices and how Americans are willing to sacrifice, at least in the short run, and at least right now, in terms of where they are financially and the price at the pump, which I think is now starting to go down a little bit, barely, but I did notice that today. But anyway, let me make a couple comments about 2022, and then we'll go right back to the questions. Clearly, our politics, as we've been talking about, is in real overdrive right now, and we thought that, you know, the 2020 election was going to be about Trump's impeachment. And by the time we got to November of 2020, no one was talking about that. COVID had hit. Now we have an international situation which has suddenly come on our landscape. No one saw that coming. The point being, we really don't know right now where the issues that are going to drive the electorate in September and October, 7 months from now, what those issues might be. We might have a resurgence of COVID. We might have an international crisis, or maybe an economic situation that's very different from where we are now, right now, or something entirely different. The point being, our politics is in overdrive, and the issues come and go with so much rapid turnover that we've really gone through. No wonder the public is somewhat frustrated that we don't hang around long enough on an issue to address it. I talked about in answer to the question that we've had lots of change elections, and that's part of the reason why. But I want to also talk a few moments about just the nature of our voting and how that's changed, because it really sets a mood for what we're looking at in 2022 in the midterm elections. So, you know, most of our history from World War II to 2000, and I will go quickly for that generation, Jay, I will not linger, my favorite time period, but people were ticket splitters. They voted for a Democrat of one party, a Republican for Senate, one for president, another one for Congress. The party labels didn't drive the electorate. It's still very important, but didn't drive it to the degree that it does today. So a vote for president didn't tell us a whole lot about whether you were going to vote for the president's party for Senate or Congress as well. So we had lots of ticket splitters. It's funny that when Richard Nixon won the 2 times, and when Ronald Reagan won the 2 times in the 70s and then in the 80s, the Republicans held only half of the seats in the Senate that those 2 Republican presidential candidates carried. So they carried, in those instances, 4 elections, some of which were by pretty good significant landslides in 72 and 84, and yet half the seats weren't held in the Senate by the Republican Party at the time. Fast forward to what has now become a nationalization of our politics, and the situation has changed dramatically. Democrats hold nearly 85% of the seats in the 2 states that Obama carried in 2008 and 2012. In the seats that Democrats beat Trump in, the 20 states that Biden beat Trump in 2020, Democrats hold 98% of those Senate seats. The only one being Susan Collins from Maine, who won. It's the only Republican who won in a state that Joe Biden carried of the 20. So it's a very, very different picture indeed. It's sort of become a lot harder to carry a state behind enemy lines. The red states have gone redder and the blue states have gone bluer, and it's much more difficult to do that. So we come to the midterms, and what do we know about, what can we expect despite all these changes and uncertainties in our elections and our public perceptions of our politics? What can we expect? We know that nothing good typically happens in the first midterm election of a president. Let me say that again because it's a mouthful.
Well, nothing good
typically
for
happens
the president.
For the president's party. For the president's party, in this case, a Democrat. Yeah, it's terrific for the party out of power, but nothing is good typically for the president's party during their first midterm election. So we know from trends, the smallest losses, let me find the number, smallest loss in the House seat occurred in 1990 when Bush 41 was just coming out of the first Iraq War. The Republicans only lost 8 seats. His approval rating had been only recently before that up in the 80s during that time. Barack Obama had the biggest shellacking in recent history in 2010. 63 seats the Democrats lost in 2010. That was the Tea Party election. Only George Bush in 2002, George Bush 43, following the 9/11 attacks, did the party of the president's party gain seats in Congress. And the Republicans picked up 8 seats that time. So it is very hard when you have a situation where the Democrats currently have a 6-seat advantage in the House, given some retirements and some vacancies, and a 50-50 Senate, that the Democrats cannot afford much of the kind of numbers that I'm talking about to survive with the House or the Senate still in Democratic control.
Can I make a quick counter argument, Lee?
Absolutely.
I'm curious what you think. All of those elections happened in a time of lower partisanship and ticket splitting. Now is it baked in? Are these districts? I mean, there's almost no swing districts anymore.
Right.
I'm just curious if that has a role in.
It's likely to limit. Yes, exactly. Because if you're going to have Democrats voting for Democrats or Republicans voting for Republicans, and you're going to have district lines being redrawn as they have been during this it
just ends up being turnout. It just if you can't get your base out, you can't win.
So way back when I was teaching political science, we talked about you had some people voted for you, some people in the other party voted against you, and you had to go for the swing voters, the independents. That changed. And it's changed in this century. And what now is, as you correctly identified, Jay, it's about not persuading the undecided. It's about getting the turnout, riling up your base. Hello, that's what's been going on in our politics. Riling up your base to get the kind of turnout you need. So one of the big question marks in 2022, if history repeats itself, the Democrats' case is baked, clearly, because the midterm elections are not good for the presidents in power. But then we don't know what influence Donald Trump is going to play in this. He's having a role in the primary process for Republicans, often supporting the more extreme candidates. And in 2010, that really hurt the Republicans in the Senate. They, in fact, lost a chance at the majority in the Senate that year because of some very extremist candidates. If the Republican Party, under Trump's influence, and it's unprecedented to have a former president have that kind of influence with the party, his party still having left office, Trump would then could sway the type of candidates who are running. So we don't know what the issues are going to be, and we don't know the role that Trump is going to play in a very unusual environment, and we don't even know if Trump's going to run 2 years after that or what Biden's future is. So you want to have that crystal ball, Jay. You may want to buy a couple more because we're going to need it in terms of looking up things. The average, incidentally, in the House during the recent politics has been that the party in power loses 22 seats in the House and 3 seats in the Senate. If that were to happen this time, the Democrats lose both chambers. The odds are that, I don't know if I talked about the approval rating, but clearly what typically happens is, as we've nationalized our politics, is that the approval rating of the president, in this case, Joe Biden, has a lot to do with what's going to happen in the midterm elections. Biden's in the low 40s, as Barb said. That's not a good enough number. He's got to kick that up into much better numbers. Donald Trump got his clock clean in the midterm election. He had a lower approval rating than Biden does now. The only president in recent history who was below what Biden is Donald Trump 4 years earlier. Let me just see if I can just stop at that point and say,
we'll
go back to
at
your
an
questions.
hour.
Yeah, why don't we go back to the
late,
questions?
so-
The point
Yeah.
being that, if history it repeats itself, the Democrats are going to be in big trouble if Donald Trump can cast a bad shadow, or if the other issues go the Democrats' way. They might survive, but that's going to be pulling an inside straight.
Or if history is broken.
Yeah, okay. And we'll break there and we'll take it. Let's go back to the
No, I
question.
said, or if history's broken.
Or if history's broken, and that
right,
can happen
I mean-
too.
Well, are there enough seats that are up for grabs? In other words, competitive seats?
In the Senate, there's likely to be, there were 10 that were thought to be possible steals that might flip. 6 were Republicans held and 4 by the Democrats. However, in Ohio, which is one of those seats, incumbent Senator Portman has announced that he's very popular and he's no longer going to retire. He's now back out. That takes Ohio off the map for all intents and purposes. We're back at 9 possible. In the whole country, there's only 9 states right now that are going to get the attention. 5 are occupied by Republicans and 4 by Democrats. Obviously, who gets a majority of those 9 ends up controlling the Senate. In the House, it may be also, just maybe 20 or 25 seats right now, Jay, that are going to be hotly contested because
Maybe.
of redistricting and
Yeah.
the fact that there's just not that much up for grabs. It's going to be hard to get the 63 number that Barack Obama had. But again,
The margins, margins are very narrow.
you only need 5 or 6 seats, and then that flips the House, and that's thought to be a more likely outcome of that. So anyway, that's sort of a quick take on.
So can we do a couple more questions, or people can stick around? We can stick around. Yeah.
If you're willing to stick around, if our guests want to stick around, sure.
Sure.
Okay, so
We
we'll
got
start
started
with,
late. We'll stick around for a while. Yeah.
Thank you.
So we'll start with some about Biden. Do you find that the president has been ineffective in selling the positive economic condition? What would you recommend?
I'm sorry, that whether Biden has
Biden been effective at selling the good economic news? And if not, what would you recommend? This is your favorite kind of question.
I would recommend. No, he's not been effective, and I would recommend better messaging because the fact. I mean, we came out at the end of December with the notion that Biden hadn't done anything because he didn't get Joe Manchin to switch on the Build Back Better, and therefore the fact that he passed infrastructure, American Rescue Act, and many federal judge appointments, kind of got washed away by the process. It was all about, is Manchin coming with the Democrats? Is Manchin not going with the Democrat? And that was the whole discussion for weeks and weeks and weeks. And that was just so off message. So the answer is, he needs to be, the Republicans are very good at coming up with some messages and sticking to them. Sometimes they may be, pushing the reality a little bit, the lock her up kind of theme, but it punches through and sticks. Democrats not so good at that.
But I think it's actually beyond that. I think the message, if you're in the White House, is just look at the polls. We've talked a lot about this tonight. So the economic numbers are great. So should you be talking about the great economic numbers, or should you be talking about the thing that is keeping anybody from recognizing the great economic numbers? Inflation. And he's been fairly late to the game in looking like he's doing anything about it. He can't do anything about it. Presidents actually can't do almost anything about the economy at all. It's the perception of them doing something that can move the numbers. And they have been late to the game, in my opinion. They've been late to the game.
I would suggest
in taking action or looking like they're taking action.
I think I would say that during the first year, Biden was late to the game in a lot of things because he thought he was going to negotiate settlements with the Republicans in the Senate, which was so last century, to use that phrase.
That was Obama's mistake too.
Yes, and so I think that was a big mistake on his part. I think in the case of Putin and Ukraine, I think that's been the one case where he's been pushing his NATO alliances. He's in Europe, as Barb mentioned right now, and I think that's the one issue where he kind of looked around the corner and saw it was coming a lot better than he has on domestic issues.
Because that was a last century issue.
That's true. There you go. There you go. Sorry.
Got another one?
There's a question related to a topic we haven't touched upon at all tonight. Have you any polls or comments regarding critical race theory?
Well, anybody want to take that? Because Barb talked about the culture clash, and that's sort of become a very big part of our politics. If the race for governor in Virginia showed that if you could really push on the education front, and the Democrat candidate just really stepped in it, Terry McAuliffe, by kind of like misstating the notion that parents shouldn't have any say in the kids' education, which was like blew up in his face. But critical race theory is part of all that. Tough issues.
Well, also, I would also add that I think it's part of a whole host of issues that we talked a bit about, and it's focusing on look, midterm elections are pretty local. Lee talked a lot about the fact that our elections tend to get nationalized, but during the midterms, there's also opportunity for candidates to take a stance on issues that is much more local and focused on a smaller group of individuals. And I think that the strategy has been to take all of these issues and really draw a circle around them about what teachers can teach and what role parents should have in the schools and their children's education. And I think that it really isn't so much about what teachers are teaching as it is about what the values are that that we are choosing again to focus on. And I know there's been a couple of op-eds both in the New York Times and in the Washington Post, kind of warning Democrats about the fact that this isn't just another another issue that they can pass by and assume that people think that education is an important thing. And just assume that we're all on the same page. I think it's something where, as I mentioned, they're on topics that we actually have a very strong consensus about, but they are being, I think, being used on both sides at the extremes. We see that very much on abortion. where there has been a very strong consensus of what Americans believe, but the debate becomes very different because it's about winning elections, and so that division is and that rally cry to, as both Jay and Lee mentioned, getting out the base. It's no longer about compromise. It's no longer about appealing to the middle. It's about energizing the intensity of the base to get them to vote.
And these culture issues are real mobilizers, and the parties understand that. I would point out one thing. You made an interesting point, Barb, is that some of these issues are more localized, but I think that the local issues come to the fore more in races like for governor and for a mayor, local races, school boards. I think the races, the national races, will be the Congress and the Senate. We're going to be hearing about the culture issues, but we're going to be hearing more about where the nation should go in terms of those broader themes that we talked about in the beginning.
And I think one of the I know it doesn't have to do with critical race theory, and I think the polling on that has mostly shown that there's really a lack of clarity and understanding, other than for the really politically charged words. And if you ask the questions in other ways, without those, polarizing, without the polarizing language, you find the consensus. But to your point, I think that what one of the things that is gonna be rather impactful are the decisions that the Supreme Court is going to be making in the coming year as well. And that's certainly going to nationalize some of these cultural issues that we're talking about.
Can I take 30 seconds to answer 3 quick questions that were in chat? Because we can just answer them like this. So people get that. One of them is, how do you know if you're getting a internal or push poll? Ask. If they call, ask. Who's sponsoring the poll? You just ask.
If they don't answer you, hang up. Ask for a phone number. Can I call you back? And if they don't, that's not one. No.
Second question, to summarize, we're only calling cell lines? Yes? No, we call cell and landline. And then the last one is, and this is kind of interesting, in this time of world crisis, do we see more people wanting to participate in polls, or less, or fewer? And there's no change. I mean, the answer is that doesn't really change much, right? Based on things going on in the world. The response rate is the response rate.
No. Actually, the time we see the greatest participation is right around election time, and when people vote. And I think one of the kind of tricky things that we had in 2020 was people were voting at different times. 70% of voters voted before election day, and people
in some cases weeks before.
Yes. And so so when people vote, they participate. And normally when we're doing polling, when everybody used to vote on election day, if we did a poll very close to election day, it would be incredibly accurate. This time we had to, in 2020, we had to measure whether, what proportion of people are going, we had to guess what proportion of people are voting by mail, what proportion of people are going to be voting early, and what proportion are going to show up on election day. And if you recall, depending upon how you voted, it was very strongly related to your party preference. So if Republicans voted on election day, Democrats were more likely to vote by mail, and both Democrats and Republicans voted early in person. But that became very tricky. So one of the things to watch for the 2022 election polling is if there's early vote, if there's mail vote, when is the poll being done? Because when people have the opportunity to mail in their ballot, when people have the opportunity to vote early in person, those groups are going to be more likely to participate in those polls.
And the early vote tends to be a little more democratic than the day of election vote, which means those early polls may show a slightly more democratic margin than the final ones actually do. So that's another little tricky element. Jay, to your question though about people responding, I just wanted to say that after 9/11, an event that obviously still is in the memory of so many of us, we didn't know whether to poll on New York City and get New York City attitudes on that because of the enormity of what was going on. And we waited a couple weeks and then we said, you know what, let's take a look and let's try it out, make sure sensitive to that people may not be eager to. And what we found out was that there was a real sense of, I have views, I want to talk. We never saw New York City have a higher response. New York City is a tough place to poll because the first thing that you get is you have to answer 6 questions before you get the first one out. Like, how'd you get my number? Who are you? What are you buying? What are you selling? Okay. In that case, after 9/11, there was a sense of I have opinions and I really want to have a chance to make my voice, to express them. Yeah.
There's one more in chat, and this is very quick to mention Alaska using ranked choice voting and whether that's going to, do anything. Remember, Maine's been using it for a while, and the biggest test in the nation was here, New York City, and we polled that. We're the only ones who polled that and figured out how to poll ranked choice voting. So for pollsters, ranked choice voting is a nightmare, but we figured out how to do it, especially with all the candidates.
If you have 13 candidates,
13 candidates,
and 5 choices.
But Alaska's got.
New York always has to do it bigger.
Yeah, Alaska's got a bunch in some of these races. So I don't know if it's a model or not, but it has been used in other states. And good luck polling Alaska of all places.
But I was a ranked choice vote skeptic before we did New York City, and after all the research I did and the work we did to poll that election, I think it's something we should look at. I thought it was kind of cool.
Yeah, it's an interesting, and I think there's going to be a lot more of it coming to a neighborhood election near you.
All right. So any other big questions from you guys? I just blew through the chat just to clear.
There was one question I saw. Just go quickly. Does Andrew Cuomo have a future in electoral?
Oh, your favorite
politics?
topic. Come on, Lee.
I'm going with.
You're like our own Alan Chartock. Talk to us about Cuomo.
Thank you. That's and that the answer to that question is only in his dreams. Okay, we've polled on Andrew Cuomo. To run against to run against Governor Hochul, who's the first woman governor of New York who now wants to get a 4-year term in her own right, who was his lieutenant governor. And he said, in essence, this person can serve as governor in the event something happens to me. Well, something happened to him. He resigned, and now he's going to get back in and run against her. Unlikely. And also, the climate is not right for that. And if he ran, he'd have to run to the center or the right of center because the progressive wing of the Democratic Party is not about to welcome him back at this point. He might run for attorney general against Tish James. And again, same problem.
What if he runs as an independent, though? So it's like Lee Zeldin and her and Cuomo.
Yeah, he would really cause great agita within the Democratic hierarchy, but who knows what would happen in that case. As he said only a couple of weeks ago, I think, my father ran on an independent line, created an independent line on 2 occasions. Might be interesting.
He did too. He created the Women's Party or something because he couldn't get the Working Families Party, right? Didn't that happen? Yeah.
Yes, and so I think
now we're deep in the weeds.
Yeah, we're deep in the weeds, but never say never when it comes to New York, because we know New York's a different ballgame.
Yeah,
New York politics, that is.
And how about just one more on the subject of future polling? Have you done or plan on doing any polling on possible Republican presidential candidates?
Always. Always. We are going to probably wait a bit, till after the midterms, but that will start as soon as the midterms are over.
If not before,
and it'll have the same. And it'll have the same value it does every time 2 years before, where the number one candidate doesn't even make it to the Iowa caucuses.
Yeah. We had a forum which some of you folks who are in the audience may have attended in Washington, D.C. in the spring of 2015, which would be the comparable time in this election cycle, this coming spring, as it was for the 2016 election cycle. We had 4 major political journalists from Washington attending, from Chuck Todd to
Maggie.
Maggie Haberman and others. At that event, not one person mentioned Donald Trump as a possible presidential candidate with any impact. They thought he would just flame out. And no one talked also about Bernie Sanders.
I don't even think their names were mentioned.
The names were not mentioned.
Hillary Clinton was not even a discussion.
Hillary Clinton was going to get the nomination just for asking. Didn't happen. She had to really struggle for it. And Donald Trump was not.
Yeah, Jeb Bush, he was going to run against. It would be Bush.
That's
Clinton.
Jeb with an exclamation point.
Jeb.
Jeb. Jeb.
You like doing that, don't you? You'd like him to run again, so you could just do that again, wouldn't you?
Jeb. Yeah, that'd be fun.
Oh, goodness. Lee, Barb, and Jay, can you mention the student fellow positions? I didn't want to go all evening without mentioning those new positions that
Well, thank you so much. There's no such thing as a free webinar, apparently. No, this one is free. But if you feel moved, we are right now, seriously, we are raising money for scholarships for the summer to have 2 lucky students get to work with us both in the media side of things and in the data side of things. And people are contributing, and a lot of that is alumni. Some of it are staff of the Marist Poll who have been asked to contribute as much as they can. But for you in the audience, give what you
have the students. And then also, the other thing I might mention too is we do have a summer course for rising high school juniors and seniors. So if you know a rising high school junior or senior that might be interested in playing with polling over the summer for 2 weeks on campus, we would love to have them.
Yeah. And I would be remiss.
It's really a fun, both theory, but a lot of hands-on stuff that has to do with polling and data analytics.
And I'd be remiss.
That's what the high schooler wants to do during their summer.
Just 2 weeks.
But it is college credit, 3 college credits.
Yeah. And I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that, we're talking to obviously a lot of alumni from the college, many of whom have worked at the Institute for Public Opinion when they were students at Marist. You guys were the building blocks. Some of you back to as far back as 1978, Jay, previous century again. And that you guys, it's because of the work that you all did during the time period as we built in Adrian and elsewhere in Fontaine and now in Hancock. A very successful program because we were working with great ingredients at Marist, and that's still the case.
I just want to mention, because I obviously have worked with you guys for 20, 25 years, however long it's been that you were our pollsters on NBC, but I've been only here for like 4 years. The students that we work with and the students that we're looking to provide scholarships for, these are not like work study jobs. I have been very impressed with, I used to drive interns very hard at NBC. I was kind of known as like, wow, you're making me work. Damn straight. These students, especially over the last couple of years, they do the work and they leave knowing more than any student would be expected to know and the experience they have. Our podcast, just to bring that up again, is entirely done by students. And it's not like they take all week to do. You've got 2 hours. Get this show together, and they do it. The data processing and the work in the data. In our survey center, we've rebuilt the entire way that we manage all of these students. We've had to, because we've gone remote and hybrid. We've built it in this software system. These students have done that, and they're not IT students. They're not like coders. They have helped build, and in some cases built, the very foundation for the way we manage these hundreds of students now that work in our poll. So these aren't, if you're thinking about scholarships, summer job, what are they going to get coffee for Lee? I mean, Lee can get his own coffee. These kids work. Yeah, these kids work, and the jobs are great, and the experiences they get are real world, not get coffee, get your dry cleaning. It's a real world experience, and they leave, and when they talk back to us from their jobs in the real world, the feedback is great.
Jay,
it's really, really endearing.
An alum from a while back, Matt Grant, was an intern for you at NBC, and he's got a whole shelf of Emmys now. He's working recently, getting a job in Austin, Texas.
He's turning Austin upside down already on their investigative team.
He's on this webinar, guys.
Yes.
He's in
Matt,
the chat box right now.
Oh, hey, Matt.
Oh, hey, Matt.
Shout out. That's great.
Congrats, Matt, on doing what you're doing in Austin. I only see it on Twitter, and I don't see it from you. You were doing the work. He's like breaking the investigative stories, holding the state of Texas and others to account.
And he
Just so cool what you did.
Really
also
great.
I learned from the best, from you, Jay.
Oh, there you
Got
are.
big shoes to fill.
But you
I'm
know,
just trying to keep
Matt,
up with you.
what's fascinating about it is that like you just came into Texas and you're already getting like major stories. It's really awesome.
I have a really good team here, so I got very lucky.
Yeah.
Well, you only get lucky when you're good. So you got lucky, but you're good. So that's how
And
that
you
happens.
work and you work hard.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. I really enjoyed this conversation. It's great seeing you all virtually. It's great that, we're able to do something like this virtually. I couldn't even imagine this back in the days when I was interning with Jay, that this would even be possible. So,
What year would that have been, Matt?
that was 2005, 2004,
Oh.
2005, I think.
Did you shoot your
Only
first
moderately
stand-up?
painful.
Was your first stand-up? Did we get you shot your first stand-up?
Yes,
Is that us?
my first stand-up was with you, and I don't even know where that's probably in a drawer somewhere on a tape that I can't even play anymore. But
Yeah, digitize it if you can before it fades away, because that's when you'll remember a long time. If you're not because I did it for you, but that first time you're on camera, it's always like, oh my God.
yeah.
Anyway, congratulations.
Yeah,
you make
and I know it looks like we knew you were there, but that was just a great,
Yeah.
what a great surprise and good to talk.
Yeah,
good to talk to you.
really nice to see you.
Great to see you all as well.
Yeah, that was fun. So the
All right.
magic of Indigenous.
Ladies, what do we do now?
Okay.
We say
Well,
thank you very much. I
Yeah,
mean, I
thank
think
you.
Yeah.
I think we're
Really
good.
enjoyed.
So in consideration of everyone's time, I think we'll wrap it up now. Thanks to everyone who stayed. Just about everybody stayed on for this extra half an hour, which was great.
That's great, and really a pleasure to interact with all you guys, and thanks for all the great questions.
Yes, and thanks for staying with us. And Lee, Barb, Jay, thank you so much. You've done this several times for us. Matt, thanks for jumping in on the conversation. We appreciate that. I have included in the chat box the link for the fundraiser that Lee and Barb spoke about. And this will be recorded and on our YouTube channel within the next couple of days. And I've also put a link to our YouTube channel in the chat box. So again, thank you everyone for joining us and for staying connected to Marist. And we look forward to you joining us again for something in the future. And I hope everyone enjoys what's left of your day.